Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is We Are the One, Lincolnshire FA's official grassroots football podcast, where we speak to the amazing people who make football happen in our communities. This episode's a little bit different. We're looking back at February's Football v Homophobia month. So we're speaking to the media lead for Football v Homophobia, Jon Holmes. We talk about how the campaign started, why it's so important to tackle homophobia in football from both grassroots to the professional game, and the impact that Football v Homophobia has had at our level. Enjoy. So I'm with Jon Holmes from Football v Homophobia. Jon, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role as part of Football v Homophobia, and I guess the wider background about yourself as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Zach, for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. I am the media and comms lead on the Football v Homophobia campaign. It's been running for over 15 years now. So, we've had a really, really busy month of action in February. So I tend to help to obviously sort out all the kind of social media bits that we do, presentations at events, help to organise our annual awards event, which is happening in Glasgow on Friday, the 7th of March. So if anyone's listening and is able to get along to that, you'd be very, very welcome. We also do other events throughout the year, including a big summer get-together called Football Pride. So I help to organise that too. So any sort of, any bits of words or visuals, I guess, maybe that come out of the FVH campaign, I work on that with my colleagues, Lou Englefield and Jen Watts. And it's a real pleasure. And then more widely, I'm a sports journalist, been in the industry for over 20 years, spent most of my career working at Sky Sports. I went freelance about 3 years ago. I still do some bits back at Sky now and again, but also kind of mostly try to focus on the campaigning work that I do. Sports Media LGBT Plus is the vehicle that I tend to use to do a lot of that work. It's a industry network group, but also digital publisher and a bit of a kind of media house for lots of different projects that we help to run, not just by ourselves, but in conjunction with others. And my writing, that all mostly comes through Outsports, which is the kind of US based LGBTQ sports news website. It's been running for like 25 years.
So in short, incredibly busy with a lot of hats.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a jigsaw, my job. I tend to fold bits of it into other bits and try and make it work. But it's quite nice to have the variety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how did the Football v Homophobia campaign start? Because obviously it's 15 years since that first launch now. So how did that initially come around?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit before my time, really, because I kind of really got active in this space. Well, it was after my own sort of coming out journey, which happened in like 2013, and then as through my role with Sky, I became involved with Rainbow Laces. But then, of course, you end up meeting so many people across this space, and always was really a big fan of all the work that Football v Homophobia had done, which by that stage, when I came out 2013, it had already been going for like a few years, and then just kind of gravitated more onto work on the campaign. But yeah, its history goes back to 2008 in actual fact, which was run by a previous iteration of the campaign, which was called the Justin campaign. And really that started up in 2008 to mark the 10-year anniversary of the tragic death of Justin Fashanu. And they did loads of kind of amazing work in their first couple of years of kind of raising awareness and just coming at this very difficult topic for football, because it was still very much taboo, I think, really, to talk about being gay in men's football at that time. Homophobia was very much brushed under the carpet, so endemic, as we know, in the men's game, and the history of chanting and just general kind of homophobic language and behaviour that was around the men's game, which still lingers on today. But they really focused people's attention through the work that they did, and Football v Homophobia began as a day of action on the February the 19th, 2010, which was the date of Justin Fashanu's birthday. And that really, that really helped to get people's attention to have this one focused awareness day. And that has now gone on to become the International Day Against Homophobia in Sport, which is maybe in this country, we're much more focused around the FEH, Football v Homophobia message, but actually in wider Europe and also Spanish-speaking countries such as Mexico and in South America, they really do quite a lot around February the 19th as a day in the calendar to really, raise awareness around LGBTQ phobia in sport. So that's kind of the background to the campaign, and from there it developed into a week of action, and then a month of action. And people often say, well, why do you need a month? Why do you have to have a month for all these things? Well, actually, it was because the football calendar, what really got people energized around the campaign was to dedicate a home fixture to FEH. And of course, not everybody plays games on February the 19th, or not even in that week you have a home game. So the only real way to do it was to make sure that everyone had the chance to designate a home game, was to do it in the month of action, which became February. And of course, that ties in as well with it being LGBT History Month in the UK.
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say that since it's first started and since its first iterations, it's definitely, I guess, snowballed and sort of become this big, this massive thing that is, firmly in the football calendar, every season, come hell or high water, I guess.
Yeah, and the nature of campaigns has really kind of shifted, I guess, in the last 15 years, particularly with Rainbow Laces coming along as well, which, as you'll know, and many of your listeners will know, began as like a allyship initiative in the Premier League. Very much focused around that top level of, how can you kind of disrupt football in a way to help show some allyship towards players who might be gay, who might be bisexual, who might be struggling. And then, of course, Rainbow Laces went on its own journey of evolving into something else, which was kind of like this wider celebration, almost like a Pride Week in the Premier League and throughout wider football. Then it's kind of diverged again because only the Premier League really does it, and FA does some work around it at grassroots football. Obviously, I know you guys in Lincolnshire, one of those counties that does a load around Rainbow Laces, which is fantastic. And yeah, so football v homophobia has kind of, I think quite deliberately, but also purposefully set itself apart from Rainbow Laces. Really, a lot of the work we've been doing this month is to kind of reconnect people to FEH if they have kind of drifted away for whatever reason. And I think at this time, we're really conscious that you need a specific anti-discrimination message to go out within football. As again, the stats and the evidence that you folks have put forward at Lincolnshire really demonstrates the need for that. And I think that's really, really important. So yes, it's great to have the Rainbow Laces celebratory kind of aspect as well, but we also need to think really targetedly around anti-discrimination for LGBTQ people and those people who aren't LGBTQ but are also affected by homophobia and transphobia. So that's kind of the differing natures, I guess, of those campaigns. And then, of course, we've got the work that Kick It Out does, and other kind of bodies in football too. So there's a bit of a mix of stuff going on, but I think it's important to have these times throughout the year to focus on particular things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we hear the stories in the news quite a lot. And obviously we, at Lincolnshire, we're very transparent in sharing the statistics around sort of, reporting and cases found proven and all those sort of things at the different sort of levels of the game. But why for you is it so important to tackle homophobia in football? And has that, I guess, changed over time from when you've been involved in the campaign? And, do you find that's different from maybe the grassroots game to the professional game and sort of everything in between?
Well, I mean, the reason to tackle it is as prescient now as it ever was. I mean, only the conversation that I guess I had with you on the Football v Homophobia podcast, which we did about 3 years ago now. I think a lot of people actually listened to that. More people maybe listened to that than I thought at the time, because a lot of people have said it to me. You had kind of shared your story a little bit. I think maybe on social media, you kind of made some references to things that happened to you in grassroots football. But then for us to actually talk it all the way through, for you to explain how that affected you, and maybe affected friends and family as well, how it made you at times not want to play football, whether you felt you were welcome in the game or not. And that was just your own personal lived experience. And when you extrapolate that through to the numbers that we see, over 600, almost 700 reports of homophobic language and behaviour, which came through to grassroots football in the FA disciplinary review. And then you think about all the examples of this language and behaviour that aren't reported. So, and we know for our community, a lot of this stuff goes under the radar. People don't talk about it for whatever reason. Maybe they're not LGBTQ themselves. so they don't think necessarily that they should be the ones to speak up about it. So you've got all these kind of things that are flying around, and that's the reason why, it's so important to tackle this. I've heard and spoken to people even in the last few weeks, of people have told me that yes, there's been an incident of homophobia in their league or in their club, and the person involved in that has walked away from football entirely. They don't want to play anymore. They don't feel like they fit, and that's terrible. I mean, how many people do we know, have had really negative experiences, and then there's all the people that might, just kind of kept it to themselves, and that's really brutal. Now, whether you're a fan or a player or a coach, whatever your involvement is with the game, a match official, we shouldn't be losing people to football for any type of discrimination, but particularly for this, when I often feel like people use these words, use the language, use the behaviors, and they don't necessarily mean to be homophobic. They don't hold homophobic views themselves. They're not like naturally discriminatory towards lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans people, but they use the language and they don't really think about the effect that it has. And that's obviously why a campaign like ours exists, because so much of what we need to do is education, as well as, yes, we need there to be stricter punishments, and we need people to understand the impacts of the language and behavior they use. But actually, a lot of this is just quite simple stuff that we could eradicate if football was better at teaching people not to use, these slurs.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, and a lot of people sort of say all the time, don't they, that football mirrors society, and it do you find that to be the case, or do you think that maybe wider society is a little bit maybe further on than what football as a society and as a community is, or do you think they are very, very closely aligned, and one just sort of blows into, I guess, a bit more of a limelight, or a bit more, or puts a bit more of a magnifying glass on what is happening in wider society?
That's very much the word. I think magnify is where it comes down to. Like, a lot of people, they go about in their everyday lives, they don't use this type of language, but there's something about football, something about the tribalism of it, the competitiveness of it, the traditions of it, that means that sometimes when their emotions run high, or they want to get an advantage over somebody, or they think they're in a position where they need to reassert their masculinity or their power over somebody, they go for these words, they go for these behaviors. And a lot of the time, I don't think they realize the trouble that they could themselves get into. I mean, there's been a story that's Kick It Out has shared with the BBC, even just as we're talking today, about a fan who's been on an education course, having been caught chanting the homophobic slur associated with Chelsea against Chelsea fans. Didn't really think about it, didn't really understand necessarily, the nature of that, and how it is now seen as a potential hate crime offence by the Crown Prosecution Service. So this individual's been arrested, has ended up, going through a disciplinary process, which has sent them on a fan education course, and is now kind of talking about it. So, these are kind of the things that are happening in society. And again, social media is, I guess, the major thing that's changed in the last 15 years from when football homophobia began to where it is now. There is this kind of, the words that people use have changed, has maybe shifted, but there are some that seem to be coming back. There's other phrases that people have picked up online. Young people are seeing them or hearing them, and are taking that into school, or therefore taking that onto the football pitch as well. These are kind of phrases like, I don't want to hopefully upset anybody on the podcast you're listening to, but these are phrases like "okay groomer," and this kind of referencing to grooming, associating kind of gay men necessarily with that kind of horrible crime, and this is what homophobia looks like today, along with the kind of more familiar slurs. So there's a lot going on. It's really important that football gets a grip on this and doesn't just kind of sit back and say, well, it's just social media, there's nothing we can do. We have to be better at educating people, and a lot of the time it's preventative, because we don't want to be dragging people through the courts if they've chanted a slur or shouted a slur across a terrace. We should be trying to nip it in the bud before it gets to that stage.
Absolutely, and I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of it's that level of education, isn't it? And it's that sort of tackling the issue root and stem. You know, at the end of the day, even as a county, we don't want to be, we don't want to be punishing people and taking people out of football, but ultimately there has to be a level uh, of consequence for actions and a level of, providing an opportunity to reflect and learn actually about why that is such an issue.
Yeah, and I think you folks have done that brilliantly at Lincolnshire. I mean, it's the FA's obviously brought in this kind of mandatory punishments of like 7 game bans for aggravated breaches, and fines for clubs, and players need to get sent on mandatory education course. And I think that's really, really great. And we're seeing obviously a rise in reporting numbers, and that's something the FA really wants to highlight around. They're saying, look, that's encouraging. It means more people are reporting this type of abuse. But I think you also, when you look at the numbers, are like, okay, this is like a 20% increase now on the previous season. There's more incidents of this type of discrimination that go through the process and come out the other end proven than for any other type of discrimination. And so it's not just, I don't think it's enough to just be saying, well, this is really great, more people reporting, and we can all just kind of move on, because clearly the extra punishments that we brought into effect are having an impact. But that, as I say, that isn't enough, because there are going to be people who get caught up in these processes that don't need to be, if they just had some simple basic education. So Lincolnshire is a great, and I don't need to tell you, but I mean, people who maybe don't know what a shining example Lincolnshire is in the county FA system. And there's a reason that you folks have won, the FEH award for county FA the last 2 years running. And you're one of 50 across the country. There's a big gap between what other county FAs are doing and what you're doing. Even just to the point of putting out your own kind of disciplinary numbers, and talking about what's happening in your county. There's very, very little evidence of that happening elsewhere. So, we understand that, yes, other county FAs, maybe they're grappling with different problems, but this should be universal. Every county FA should be wanting to tackle this and trying to be proactive about the way they do it.
And do you think there's maybe been, or have you seen a shift in attitudes towards LGBTQ plus inclusion in football over the years? And I think one phrase that we hear really, really often is, people wanting to, or using the term, keep politics out of football, and let's not make the game political, or have political message, or whatever it is. And I hear it all the time, but do you think there's been a positive shift in that attitude, or do you think there's maybe been a little bit more? And again, it's all about that magnifying glass, isn't it? And how, and whether they, for example, from an external media, I guess, perspective, focus on that narrative for whatever reason, or do you think that attitude has changed?
Well, yeah, there's two parts to your question. I think there's always like peaks and troughs in kind of in the way that these things move through the cycles. At the moment, for LGBTQ people everywhere, we're feeling the pressure of kind of governmental institutions, of changes in the US, perhaps of kind of big focus on human rights, international tournaments, campaigns like Rainbow Laces being caught up in controversy because some people are interacting with that, in a very different way, maybe in a way that we haven't seen before. Maybe that's because of their faith or some other pressure. And then, of course, when it comes to, I guess, when it comes to the kind of wider questions of society, and keep politics out of football, keep politics out of sport. Yes, I mean, in its purest natural form, we would all love football to be free of any kind of, societal, politics or pressures or whatever you want to call it. But football doesn't live in a bubble. Like, all of us, we're all affected by things that go on around us. You can't tell me that, if you grow up in a working class area, you support your local team. That's representative of your community, and, if there's a political struggle that's going on in the background, that naturally translates onto the terraces and the way that people get energized around certain causes. We should be at a stage now where, forms of discrimination there should be a universal kind of understanding that we need to eradicate this from our game, because it has a really detrimental effect. But yes, there's obviously now a heightened amount of voices who are so kind of like wedded to the idea that football should be pure and unsullied in their view from anything, that even, campaigns like Her Game Too, show racism the red card, our campaign, all of these kind of initiatives to bring more people, to make football truly more diverse and inclusive, seem to them to be something that's spoiling what they love, or kind of somehow taking it away from them, which is absolutely ludicrous. But they obviously feel empowered to say that now. So we have to kind of navigate our way through that very kind of difficult minefield at times. But I think your average supporter understands the need for these messages, and I think the trick of it is to try to communicate it in a way that's genuine, that's well articulated, that's authentic. And the more that we have that LGBTQ representation in the game, that will grow the visibility. And you only need to look at the FVH as a campaign. The success of it has been in large part due to the passion and the energy of LGBTQ fan groups and LGBTQ inclusive clubs, from Stonewall FC all the way up to Lincoln United, and everywhere else. So that is the energy that I think keeps us all going, and the amazing allies that we have across the game as well.
Fantastic. And do you think, campaigns like Football v Homophobia or Rainbow Laces, do you think there's maybe a need for, I guess, a chance for reflection, I guess, and maybe understand where the campaign is working? And obviously with Rainbow Laces this year, we certainly saw a lot of, I think backlash is maybe the wrong term, but a little bit of pushback, I guess, is maybe the right way to put it, in terms of from the very elite level of the game. And there's obviously a few high profile cases of players or clubs not wanting to engage with the campaign this year. Do you think there's maybe the campaigns have to sort of evolve and make sure that they stay at the forefront, but stay relevant, and also deliver that level of targeted, I guess, approach in where it really is going to have that impact?
Yeah, and I think we've seen that evolution. So, like, for example, we've done a lot of work with the EFL. In February, they've had its second annual Rainbow Ball activation. I think they've deliberately gone down a different route to the Premier League and Rainbow Laces. And it might seem to your average person, oh, maybe these things are the same. One's just putting a rainbow on a football, the other one's putting a rainbow on a corner flag or whatever. But actually, I think the manner in which they've approached it, the EFL, has been different. They've really tried to engage, community foundations. They've tried to, encourage individual clubs to create content around the Rainbow Ball, and to explain how their clubs are linked to local community groups and stuff. And that isn't to take anything away from Rainbow Laces, because I mean that again focuses on community foundations and is a showcase, I guess, for ED&I work that community trusts do. But I think it's just the general manner. Maybe it's the appetite that's around it. Maybe, and this has again been picked up in the kind of post analysis of Rainbow Laces, is maybe there was something about it this year that really didn't feel as if it was like evolving at the same rate that all these other things that I've already spoken about are going on in society. I mean, the kind of the things you mentioned, I don't think backlash is necessarily the right word, but what certainly happened was that a few kind of juicy morsels rose to the surface and got picked over by the media, particularly because they were good stories. And there was a lot of kind of, you've got this idea of conflict going on, and there could be people, and we explored this a little bit on our Football v Homophobia podcast as well, when we did a Rainbow Laces wash up with the fan groups. I mean, one of the things that comes out of these kind of backlashes, as it were, controversies, is that actually the fan groups get more inquiries and more membership than ever. So Rainbow Devils, Manchester United, they had one of their players who didn't want to wear the anthem jacket, which wasn't really a pride jacket in any. It was one of these Love Unites Adidas themed jackets. It wasn't necessarily a rainbow, but for whatever reason, that hadn't been communicated well enough to the players. Probably a very last minute thing presented to them in the locker room. One of them says, "Nah, I'm from a country that we can't support LGBTQ rights." So maybe he was saying something like, he's worried, because I think sometimes these players that are come into our league are from societies, are from countries where they don't have like protections for LGBTQ people. They might not necessarily be homophobic themselves, but they could be concerned about the impact on their families or how they might be treated in the media. And if they're expected to make a split-second decision, in a locker room But it's not something that I agree with. I think they should be, I'd hope they show the courage. I'm sure most of them do, but actually the ones we hear about are the ones that don't, which is, why we end up with three stories: Palace, Ipswich, Man United, that of course become front and center around the whole campaign. And that's, I guess, the nature of the way that we kind of interact with these things now. And then, 18 Premier League captains wore that rainbow armband without any kind of foible or issue that we know about. One did wear it but had a message on it, or about Christianity, about Jesus, and the other one had never worn the armband even before Ipswich came into the Premier League. So that's that actually, when you put it into that broader context, it doesn't seem as bad.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really important as well that obviously we've touched on, I guess the maybe some more of the challenges around the campaigns, but I think it's really important that we celebrate the success around them as well. And is there anything that for you sort of stands out in terms of, I guess, success stories from clubs or individuals? I mean, we've obviously touched on the way that the EFL have approached the campaign as well. Is there anything that sort of stands out for you?
Yeah, I think we've had a wonderful month of action for Football v Homophobia. We've had at least kind of 30 professional clubs in the men's game, really kind of engaged around the campaign, like dedicating match days to it at the highest levels, such as Chelsea, Leicester, Tottenham, all the way down to non-league and grassroots. There are some areas that I'm not as happy with, that I would have liked to have seen a bit more engagement from certain leagues. But actually, the amount of leagues that we did sign up, because we really did quite a lot of outreach to try to bring leagues on board, and they could then cascade the message down to their clubs. That represented, when you add up all the teams in all those leagues that did come on board, is over 1,000. So that's over 1,000 teams in the men's game, from pro to non-league to grassroots, that got this message kind of filtered out to them. And we hope, that maybe, either shifted some attitudes. And we have some examples of this happening. I mean, obviously we've got some great ambassadors now. We have a few out gay and bisexual guys in non-league football: Jamal Howlett-Mundell at Sevenoaks, and Matt Morton, who plays at manages Thetford Town. So there's a few of these kind of people that have shared their stories. And of course, when you're able to put a human face on a lot of this stuff, it really does carry so much further. People can empathize, they can relate to that individual, and that really helps things. And then in the women's game, we've had certainly up in Scotland, Celtic, Glasgow City, did some amazing work around FEH. Down here, we've had Brentford, we've had Chelsea, who do stuff every year. So I mean, it's really, really impressive. Yes, I would like, in a perfect world, I would like every club, every county FA, every league to be signed up to Football v Homophobia, and maybe we go into the 2026 month of action with a bit of renewed purpose to get that over the line. But I think when you look at the amount of champions on our website, we've got over 250, which is, feels like a real push forward again from last year. And the amount of people that have reconnected with us, want to do more beyond February. And that's the important thing as well. It's not just about 1 month. We want them to take that education into all different parts of their game. So hopefully, when these incidents sadly do happen, they'll be handled in a more robust way. And we'll hopefully see those numbers towards the end of the year reflecting a shift in the work that we're doing.
And that perfectly sort of leads me on to my next question, actually, which was around, obviously, February being Football v Homophobia month of action, but the importance of it being a year-round message, and clubs and leagues sort of making sure that they embody the message and the I guess the action being called upon across the whole season. And obviously there's certain themes and topics that are really important to keep bringing up and keep discussing around all year round. I mean, things around, like mental health struggles within LGBTQ plus community. And it's something that I speak about with my team all the time, in terms of that those mental health struggles and those barriers of participation, and, that feeling of, a level of wanting external validation, but then I guess that internal acceptance as well is obviously a real big challenge for a lot of people as well. Why for you do you think it is essential for that to be not just February and all year round across whether it be the football season or generally?
Yeah, I think what we find, like maybe as LGBTQ campaigners, is that there's so many other kind of topics related to wanting to make the game more welcoming that really relate to us as well. So whether that's International Women's Day that's coming up in March, or we have a dedicated week of action to Football v Transphobia. at the end of next month, at the end of March, to help people understand what transphobic abuse looks like, and obviously try to help our trans and non-binary friends in the game, feel included, and to show some stories of allyship there as well. And then you get into like the summer, and of course, every city and town in this country has its Pride festival, has its Pride parade at different times. So, I think it's so important for clubs to connect with their local Pride association, to have a presence at those Pride events so that people come along, take part, enjoy the festivities, but also see that football is there, that the club is represented and is part of that community. That's super important. And then, we get into like the later stage of the year. There's we now have a bisexual visibility day, or bisexual visibility week. So somebody like Jamal, who I've mentioned at Sevenoaks, is a bisexual non-league footballer. So it's particularly pertinent, I think, for him to talk about that experience and to say, why do we need that visible representation from that part of the community particularly. So all these things come along at different times in the year. And I know, sometimes we get that pushback from the social media trolls or commenters saying, oh, you've got something for every day of the week, every time of the year. Why is it so much? It's just because, there are different experiences, different things that impact upon us. And unless we have kind of a dedicated time, I guess, to talk about these things, they can just get swept up in the hoi polloi, in the everyday. And that doesn't mean we're not passionate equally about like women's issues or mental health or tackling racism. And of course we are, because everybody has a different experience. So look, that's kind of that's the direction of travel. And I think as the year goes on, particularly when it comes to maybe somebody who's really struggled at a football club, whatever role they're in, but they reach a point in their lives when they want to share, they want to unburden themselves, they want to feel that sense of liberation that you and I and so many other people that we know in football have felt, because they've been able to free themselves up from all that kind of internalized homophobia or pressures that they were under. And that day might come tomorrow, it might come in 3 weeks time, it might come in a year's time. You can't predict the day that you will feel like you need to do that, but that will also help to kind of make sure these messages come through all year round. I remember when Jake Daniels, Josh Cavallo, Xander Murray, all these guys, they didn't wait for Pride Month. They didn't wait for Football v Homophobia Month to tell the world who they are. It just happened to fall for them on a day that mattered. So every day matters for somebody.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't have said it better, actually. And I mean, just to finish us up on, really, I mean, there'll be obviously people listening to this who are volunteers, who are coaches, who have a big role to play within their landscape, within their community, within their setting. What practical steps can they sort of take to be more inclusive beyond just showing that support in February and having that real impact and showing that they are a welcome, not only a welcoming space but an accessible space for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're setting a personal example in the way that you go about your everyday coaching or officiating. You're in a position of leadership, you're in a position of authority, so you want to be that kind of role model. But I think it's just about showing up, making sure you're watchful of your own kind of language. So maybe trying to avoid, where it's obvious, where it obviously helps around kind of gendered language. So, don't necessarily kind of, if you're coaching a women's team, there might be somebody in the team who's non-binary or is kind of struggling with their gender identity. So, these are the sorts of things that you can actually set the example and to really help those individuals. Kind of allocating time for like one-on-one conversations, group activities away from the pitch that allow people to kind of let their hair down and feel comfortable, and to get something off their chest if they're struggling with that. And then, just kind of being conscious, I guess, of wider things that are going on around us, to challenge maybe some of that transphobic rhetoric, that we see so much in the media or on social media. These are the things I think, little things every day that just kind of help to set that example and to set a more welcoming environment for whoever's in your football space.
Jon, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down. I can't believe it's been 3 years since we first sat down and spoke on the Football v Homophobia podcast. But thank you so much for joining me on this one and sort of sharing the message of Football v Homophobia. And there's obviously amazing work in county to try and make football as as an inclusive space as possible for everyone. And obviously, there's still a long way to go. So hopefully, everyone takes sort of something away from what we've spoken about today. And I can't thank you enough for for joining us.
Well, look, it's our gratitude to yourself, Zach, and all the team at Lincolnshire FA. You folks really are kind of like setting the standard as a county FA, and I know you do so much hard work to make that happen. So we are very, very much appreciative. So yeah, all the best.
Thank you ever so much, John. Thank you.